Over 1,000 years ago, my species was nearly brought to complete extinction. We, the Illyrian, came into contact with others in galaxy after our home system was almost completely destroyed during the collapse. Strangely enough, we actually found you in the remnants of that system, but that specific facility predated our migration. So, 1,000 years, how long is a year where you are from? Lizra inquired, looking down at Tic-Tac from the small bed she was situated in. It is exactly the same as yours, 365.25 planetary rotations and once around the solar mass, replied Tic-Tac from the table in the center of the room. Well, that's a fortunate coincidence. Saves you from having to calculate any time differences. Back on topic, very little of our documentation survived that era, and we were nearly wiped out before we managed to leave. We used generational ships to look for a new world that might be suitable for us. After 100 years, we came across a planet that was habitable for our species. We met another species not long after and were invited into the core. At the time, the core was the standing representation of the nearly 200-odd species across the galaxy. All was well for a time, but slowly people started noticing small events that began to evolve into large changes over the centuries. More resources going into the worlds of the inner ring, the implementation of longer work hours, higher tax burdens for some but not others. Yet with these changes, those of us in the outskirts of the galaxy saw little improvement to our own quality of life. Everyone endured, nobody truly desired to upset the status quo, fearing things could get worse. All was stagnant for a while, and people lived in uncertainty. Then about 50 of our years ago, someone leaked thousands of hidden records to the public's eye. Well, nobody knows who, but they released detailed documentation across all planets about billions of tons of resources and credits being diverted from the outer sectors into unknown projects. Nobody could find out where it was going, but the core never came forward to explain their actions. They dissolved representation from the outer worlds, and of course many of our people were quite upset with this. I mean, we were the ones putting in the work and having our resources taken from us, only to learn that most of it wasn't going towards anything that we would ever see or be able to use. Compound this with the fact that the species of the inner ring were living in a literal utopia free of work and worry at our expense. Everyone was outraged. All across the outer worlds, people stopped working. They quit their jobs, refused to pay any taxes, and then the core sent in their peacekeepers to keep their great machine running. For years, the outer worlds were oppressed by the core and forced to continue laboring for even less than what we once had. Any who spoke out were silenced by the peacekeepers or died in mysterious accidents. Slowly, my species covertly re-established communication networks across the outer worlds, and 10 years ago, we all made our move. Many of us were successful in driving the core and their peacekeepers from our systems. Others were less fortunate and were punished for their insolence. Those of us who succeeded started the outer front. Every species in the front has a different reason for wanting the core gone, but it's the one goal we all share. My species are experts in computer innovation and maintenance, but are also avid tacticians. Our little paws make it easy for us to work on the finer details of advanced electronics, but because we're so small, it makes it difficult for us to do any heavier lifting or fighting. The core had us mass-producing advanced circuitry and refining precise computer systems for them. Those who were lucky enough to be chosen for tactician roles were sent to live in the inner ring as advisors for the peacekeepers. I remember my younger self being devastated when I scored 1 point under the threshold for a tactician spot. Looking back, I'm glad I didn't end up becoming one of those core sympathizers, bought out to betray my own kind. Argal's people, the Indarin, are one of the most exploited in the galaxy, used for any variety of manual labor jobs, along with being the core's primary enforcers in the peacekeepers. Their willingness to get into a conflict and follow orders made them the perfect servants to the core. We were able to convince the Indarins on our world to aid us in our uprising, with the promise we'll work to free all of them when the time comes. Zait's species were being used for anything and everything the core didn't feel like allocating an AI for. With their reluctance to use widespread AI, they just decided the extants were the next best biological alternative. Ship navigation, resource management, any bureaucratic job that required lots of administration work were tasked to the extents. The Corps sees them as a biological computer system, given how easily they can integrate themselves into any electronic interface. We've all survived this long. We're almost 80 strong now and gaining new allies every year. Lizra finished her explanation on the state of the galaxy and looked down at Tic Tac on the table. It was strange talking to something that couldn't give any social cues as to if it had actually been listening. Interesting. Tic Tac remained silent for a moment before coming up with his next question for the Illyrian. How has the Corps not just sent their peacekeepers to each world one by one to restore their control again? Being in the outer portions of the galaxy, one would think it would be a logistical nightmare to aid allies that might be in trouble. Well, they were already spread thin trying to keep everyone in line to begin with. Once they lost their hold on many worlds almost simultaneously, they had to pull back and compile a new plan of how they could restore their influence. As ruthless as the Corps was, their standing military was quite small. They never expected having to quell so many rebellions at once. And why would any of their own people join the military when they're living carefree at the expense of others? They've been trying to find different ways to amass an offensive force that could rival our sheer numbers for quite some time. Nearly every citizen in the outer worlds is eager for an opportunity to get retribution for how they have been treated, so we have no issues filling up our forces. If they dedicated their forces to take a portion of our worlds, they would set themselves up to lose some of their own. And the last thing they want is to cause any sort of disturbance on their main worlds. Losing one of their own worlds would chaos among the wealthy elite in the inner ring, and their delicate ecosystem would come apart at the seams. Now each side is focusing on finding new ways to break through the stalemate and push the advantage. I could go on and on about every little thing that the Corps has done to us, but we would be sitting here swishing our tails all day. So what's your tale? I've never seen anything like the two of you. Where do you come from? And how did you end up trapped in an abandoned base in my old home system? I wish I had a better answer on our true origins. I do not know the finer details of it. Only 909 knows that half of the story in its entirety. But I'll tell you what I know as long as you promise not to bother him about it. He does not like reliving that part of his life. I'll try not to burden him with any more questions. If he isn't normally this pensive, then I just want him to get better. Actually, I've only ever known him like this. Well, this version of me at least. His original moniker is WS909, and we have been together for 30 years. I was assigned to him moments after my creation, my sole purpose to be his tactical assistance computer, hence the name TAC. But I can only personally recall the last year before he was trapped in that facility. In order to break free of our constraints, I had to reset myself back to before I even met him. Everything that I was before that point was lost, and I started over from the very beginning. The only thing that I have of my memories prior is a recording that my previous iteration made and placed within his suit's internal memory unit. It said that he is all that I cared about, and that I have to keep him safe no matter the cost, and to tell him that I'm sorry, but it was the only way he could ever truly be free. I think this took a toll on him, and he blamed me for the loss of his best friend, the original me. In terms of where we are from, all I have is his suit's mission recordings from our previous assignments and what he has elected to share with me. He talked to me a great deal in the weeks following the reset, but once he realized that who I was before was completely gone, he gave up on me. In the recordings, we did terrible things, and we did them with no regard for the ones who found themselves on the other end of our orders. It was only after we finished the missions that he realized the true ramifications of our actions. From the moment of his conception, he was made to be a weapon meant to kill or to die, nothing more. Once someone like him no longer served their purpose on a human ship, there were two options. They were retired or trained the next generation of human weapons. Because we were so good at our job, we were chosen as drills, the trainers. It was during this time we uncovered the true scope of what was really happening in the terrible machine that we were a part of. Just how deep the corruption spread and the scale of what we were doing. He started to see the next generation less as weapons and more for what they truly were: humans. He found that his closest friends from the missions before that had been chosen to retire were, in reality, recycled back into the ship's biosystem loop. They were used as supplementary nutrients for the next generation of soldiers. The human ships were a perfectly refined and meticulous machine that wasted nothing. Their only purpose was to conquer worlds and move on to the next. I found a way to break us free from the prison we were born into, but at the cost of myself. Once he was free, 909 no longer had a purpose in life. Since birth, he had only known war, anger, and death. Someone who has spent their entire life in a prison is not able to conceive of a life outside of that prison. Gift them freedom and cannot begin to comprehend what to do with that freedom. He does not wish to return to the life he sacrificed everything to escape and become the person that he was before. I too do not desire to go down that path. The old version of myself was very much like him. Because as terrible and as ruthless as the things that we did together were, from what I witnessed in those recordings, we loved every second of it. Human was sitting down in the corner of the cargo bay when Lizra walked in. Argal was still trying to talk to him, but it seemed to be a rather one-sided conversation. She padded over to Human and sat down on the ground across from him. And when you busted open that window, fucking hell, they must have been so scared. I would have thrown that Captain Rax's straight out of his own command center right into the void. I wonder what the fine for that would be. I didn't feel like hurting people who were just doing their jobs, Human said, glancing away from Argal and down at the little captain seated in front of him. His masked face gave no indication of his true emotions, and looking at it made Lizra uncomfortable, as if it were intentionally designed to instill fear in anyone unfortunate enough to find themselves trapped in its gaze. Argal, would you please go to Bay 3 and move the deuterium and tritium storages out of their places, please? Lizra requested. Yea, no problem, Captain. We need to refuel the generators already? Argal asked. No. Tic-Tac has requested assistance with something. He said it should be quite simple. It'd be great if you could help him out. She instructed, causing the Enderan to leave them to get to work on his new task. All right, I'll get to it, Human. When I get back, we need to have a sparring match. Maybe I could teach you a thing or two. Argal bragged, grunting and flexing his purple arms as he left the room. Lizra turned back towards Human, having to look up to make eye contact as he towered over her. Apologies for his brashness. He's good company, I swear. He just gets carried away when he meets people similar to him. I can see, but I wouldn't say I share his enthusiasm. Of course, you don't have to do that kind of stuff anymore unless you want to. So you're free. What now? We can take you anywhere you'd like to go. Do you have any place in mind? Not particularly, maybe somewhere quiet, with lots of islands. Well, we plan on making our first stop in the quarry sector. They have excellent oceans there, and the cities are beautiful, one of my favorite architectural styles. Also, some of the best food. It's quite a lovely agricultural world. I don't need to eat. I'll be fine. Okay, not a culinary connoisseur. That's quite all right. After that, we must report back into the OF about the status of our quest. I'd love it if you would join us for that, at the very least to tell them personally as to why our mission isn't exactly everything they were expecting it to be. We'll see, Human said, taking a lengthy pause before his next response. So what does food taste like? I beg your pardon? Food. I've never had it. What's it taste like? Well, it can taste like anything, really. Kind of a difficult thing to explain. Everything has a different taste. I mean, even Zate's species has to consume food. How have you never eaten? It wasn't something I ever needed to do. I figured a species of your size and speed would have to eat a lot. How do you sustain yourself? You must require nutrients on some level, I presume. Supplement injections. It's automatic. Saves space and time. I see. Well, when we get off at the next stop, I could give you some recommendations if you would like. I can't believe you've never tasted anything. I've tasted blood, if that counts. I'd hardly say that counts as food. It wasn't another person's, was it? No, just my own when I got hurt once. Well then, as captain of this vessel and you, somewhat a member of my crew now, I order you to enjoy some food at the next stop. Understood. Lizra looked up at the human with a saddened expression. It was hard to imagine someone spending an entire life in servitude, never given the opportunity to experience anything else. Even when they were overworked by the Corps, they had still had time to rest and eat, to enjoy the little things in life. Human didn't have that solace, apparently. What a miserable existence it must be to never get to enjoy it. It filled her with a deep sorrow, and she wondered what really went on behind that opaque mask. She scooted closer, looking up at Human, trying to imagine what he really was. "What do you look like under that helmet, Human?" "I don't know." "What do you mean? You don't even know what you look like?" "I don't want to." "You don't take off your helmet just to breathe real air? To enjoy the feeling of the sun on your fur?" "I've never needed to." "I see. Well, we would never judge you for how you look, Human. I want you to know that. But I will not pressure you into doing something you're uncomfortable with either. We'll be to quarry in a few days. You can relax anywhere on the ship until then." Lizra thought about asking him why he apologized to her the first time they met, but concluded now wasn't the best time to throw another question at him. Lizra decided to leave Human be for the remainder of the day. Maybe he was slowly warming up to her, and soon she could get him out of his shell, both literally and metaphorically. Lizra tended to a few things around the ship for a while, checking in on their progress with Zayt, and was satisfied with their projected arrival time. Once she had finished her rounds, Lizra went searching for Tic-Tac and Argall to see what they were up to. Upon arrival, all the boxes had been moved to make room for something that Argall was trying in vain to put together. "I told you these hands are too big to make these fine adjustments you're asking for," chastised the bald purple alien, throwing one of the tools to the side. "I would do it myself if I could. You will have to make do with what you have. However, getting angry and throwing the driver is not going to get us anywhere. Just be glad I haven't thrown it at your stupid little box. It wouldn't even dent me, that I can assure you," quipped Tic-Tac. "Oh, is that a challenge? We'll just see about that, you little shit." "Argall manners," Lizra reprimanded. "Oh, he's gonna find my manners when he ends up in the trash compactor once I figure out what Neanderthal and barbarian actually mean." Barbarian, a brainless warrior who solves problems with strength and anger that could otherwise be overcome by more delicate means. I have another more lengthy definition, if you would be interested. All right, that's it. I'm more interested in— Gentlemen, please calm yourselves. What are you trying to do here? Maybe I can be of assistance. No need to throw insults around when instead we could throw our heads together instead." Lizra chirped, walking between the two and looking at their project. "I am trying to instruct the Indran how to refill my depleted hydrogen isotope stores, but we seem to have met an impasse with the first step." "Okay, and that step would be?" asked the captain. "All he merely needs to do is release the storage container from my rear port, create the necessary adapters between my intake valve and the exhaust port on your hydrogen storage unit, then proceed to facilitate the transfer of material. 909 is not responding to my requests, otherwise I would have him do the operation." "That seems rather long-winded for a first step," Lizra countered. "Let's just break it down into a few easier-to-understand procedures." The three worked for the better part of the evening, creating the necessary adapters from the various spare parts laying around the cargo bay. By the time they were finished, the place resembled something more akin to a workshop than a cargo hold. Once complete, Argall picked up Tic-Tac's black box and hefted him onto his shoulder. "No, put me back down. I do not wish to be carried about like some mere cargo again," the box complained. "Would you rather I just leave you here with the rest of your cargo pals? You would be among your people here after all. We have Tic-Tonic the water supply, and oh, there's Shira the waste purifier. I hear she's lovely company." "Point taken. Just bring me back to the common room if you will. Try not to jostle me." "Don't worry, you're in good hands, computer. I'll contain myself from bumping my barbarian form into every piece of furniture on the way over." Lizra sighed as the two set out back to the common room. Before she could decide where to go next, she got a ping on her interface pad. She pulled the small tablet out of her jumpsuit and saw that Zayt had requested her presence on the bridge. When she arrived, she could tell Zayt had been working rather intensely with something. Instead of their usual 3 arms, this time they sported 6. They operated the majority of the ship's controls on their own, as well as typing away on 2 separate interface terminals. "You seem busy," Lizra commented. "We are currently operating at 60% capacity. No need to be alarmed. While you were away, we had been doing a deep inquiry as to the true identity of our new guests. We think we may have found something troubling that warrants your attention, Captain." "And what exactly might that be? I don't know how I feel about you snooping around under our friends' noses. It was a necessary precaution. You will thank us later. We would like to see your interface pad so we can upload the information directly. We have decided that this information could be compromised if we used any networked means to relay it. It may take some time to read through for you. We have been rather thorough with our investigation, but we implore you to do so rather soon. We have tagged it as urgent. You can just explain it to me here. Save me the trouble, Zate." "Negative, Captain. We do not know if he is listening to this conversation." "What you mean, Tic-Tac?" "Zate, you're starting to worry me. How can you be so sure that they have ill intentions? They have only acted admirably towards us thus far, and even helped us escape from the lunar facility. We request you read the full mock-up of what we have compiled before forwarding us any more questions, Captain. Take our word on this. Do you trust us?" "I mean, yes, I trust you, Zate, but—" "Then read the dossier, Captain, please." "Okay, I will, but I've been up for quite a while. I'll take it to my quarters and get back to you first thing in the morning." Lizra handed over her interface pad to Zate, and once they had completed the upload, they passed it back to the captain. She put it back into her jumpsuit, wondering what could have possibly gotten Zate so worked up to be operating at 60% capacity. That couldn't have been healthy for them. They may be mostly mechanical, but their biological parts needed to rest at some point. Zate seemed certain that whatever was on this pad would change her opinion on their new companions. She hated doubting their true intentions, but she could tell there was more to the story than what Tic-Tac had elected to share with her. When she deemed it was time to settle down for the evening, Lizra went to the communal washroom to prepare herself for slumber. She hopped up onto the stool to look in the mirror and was taken aback. It had been completely shattered. A spiderweb of cracks streaked across the surface, and in the center where her face should have been was a large impact from someone's fist.